We set out from Saratoga just after 9 a.m. this morning. After 3 days of temperatures over 100, we wanted to get an early start in the cool part of the day. Our riding partner, Hoken, suffered 108 degrees riding north from LA yesterday. Today, though, we spent more time shivering than sweating. Our path took us north through San Francisco, where we caught California 1, over the Golden Gate, and then out along the coast. We stuffed an extra layer under our jackets at our first stop just past Sausalito. I don't think the temperature had reached 70 degrees anywhere along our route. Smoke was the main concern of the day. It was lightly gray from Saratoga through Point Reyes. It briefly cleared after that, only to come back thicker later. Fort Bragg was brown. A fine layer of ash covered the cars in a dealership parking lot. Ash fell like snow on us as we transitioned from the end of California 1 onto US 101. The haze in Eureka is somewhat lighter, but still around. The pictures you've seen on social media of a gray sky with a red disk of sun are not artist interpretation. That's exactly how it looked today. Our choice of path was lucky. In addition to California 1 being mostly in great condition, I mean it, the northernmost 20 miles was absolutely amazing. We learned that US 101 had been closed due to fire. Eureka is our overnight after a good day. We're looking forward to tomorrow, hopeful of less smoke. Pizza should be delivered soon, and I think I'll spend the intervening time working some lubricant into a luggage lock that jammed with ash. We are still in California, but only just. After sending last night's email, I opened fire in road maps. I learned that the last few miles of road to our stop the next night, Medford, Oregon, were closed due to wildfire. I called the hotel to find out their status, and they gave it a 50% chance that they'd be evacuated that night. I hung up, discussed with Amanda, and then called customer support to try to move us to a town 25 miles closer. They eventually transferred me back to the hotel holding our reservation, where they had just started evacuating. We quickly booked the alternate hotel farther west and went to sleep. This morning we woke up to find a new road closure, also cutting off access to the closer reservation. In fact, the map basically said that inland Oregon was not accessible from the coast. We looked elsewhere on the map, and decided to just head east from Eureka. Getting on the road was dark and dusty, but as we began to climb California 299, we saw hints of lighter cloud and smoke cover, and even a tiny patch of blue. That lasted until an hour or so in, when we came around a corner to see an orange-brown cloud hanging in the gap in the distance. Our route was going to take us just a few miles south of the Red Salmon Complex fire. The sky grew steadily darker over us until it felt like late evening starting into night. Strangely, the air didn't smell much. The dark mass blotting out the sun must have been resting on top of a cooler mass of cleaner air. Had we not all chosen sweater layers, we would have been shivering like yesterday. The darkness lasted until we began our descent into Redding, California. There we found the heat we had been waiting for. Not the 98 degrees that was predicted, but low 80s. Enough to make us remove our sweaters at the earliest opportunity. The sky in Redding was gray in one direction and blue in the other. We rode on toward the blue, which took us northeast. We're now settled in Alturas, California, where the sky was fully blue with just a little haze near the horizon before the sun went down. We think we have finally outrun the major fire dangers. Tomorrow we'll finally head north into Oregon before turning east toward Idaho. We've traveled 685 miles in these 2 days. We might go for an easier pace tomorrow. We woke to a clear blue sky and a temperature of 33 degrees. The high desert warms up fast, though. The hour it took us to get ready raised the temp over 50. We wore sweaters anyway because a 60-mile-per-hour wind chill from cruising down the road is nothing to joke about. After we crossed the border into Oregon, we came upon Lake Abbott, which was a sight and smell to behold. Giant bluffs climbed into the distance to our right, and a rocky, salt-crusted shore stretched out to our left. Smells of sulfur, dead fish, and urine, with just a hint of the yellow-flowered scrubby bushes growing along the side of the road, filled our noses. Maybe the stinkiest beautiful place I've ever been. We turned east on US 20 just before noon. Straight, flat road occasionally climbed a hill to reveal an enormous vista. For our last hour we were treated to a lovely winding road along a river through hills of many colors. Our stop tonight is Ontario, just west of the Idaho border. The sky continues to be clear. The only sign of fire is overheard discussions at filling stations about the areas we just avoided. Skipping stops in Oregon has put us a day ahead of schedule, so we decided to take a more scenic route through Idaho. We spent nearly the whole day in the national forests northeast of Boise. I know my praise for this scenery on this trip has already been high, but the Sawtooth National Forest must be where they film movies of the mountainous West. Stanley, Idaho, in particular, is the most picturesque setting. Jagged peaks of the Sawtooth Range above, green pastures cut with blue stony rivers below. Lucky for you, we even remembered to pull over and take a picture on the climb out of the valley. We're staying in Bellevue, near the southern end of the forest tonight. One more day of Idaho sights tomorrow. If spacesuit popped into your head when you saw our picture yesterday, today's images will fit the theme. An hour into our drive this morning, we came upon Craters of the Moon National Monument. This is the site of a 2,000-year-old lava flow. The landscape is a mix of black and red, alternately smooth and sharp. Astronauts were sent here before visiting the moon to learn how to take samples of the very similar rock structure. Astronomers have used the area due to its extremely low light pollution. We mostly peered downward into spatter cones left from eruptions to see evidence of how insulating this rock is. Snow sat in the bottom while we stood in 80-degree sun. We also had our first injury of the trip. I parked poorly, and the bike toppled onto its side. All humans were unharmed, but one turn signal enclosure didn't make it. This is a known problem with my era of V-Strom. The turn signals stick out too far. Luckily, the bulb was fine, and we had 2 different kinds of tape among the 3 of us to get the pieces patched back together. It will get us to Wisconsin. We arrived in West Yellowstone, Montana for the night, where we will prepare to see the park next door tomorrow. We've already seen so many amazing things on this trip that it's hard to imagine more. Everyone knows about the geyser, and the hot springs, and the forest of Yellowstone. We saw them. They were great. But what really set the park apart from other beautiful places we've been this trip was the wildlife. We saw elk, wolves, ravens, cranes, and bison. So many bison. Some animals were far off in fields, some were right along the road. Traffic would slow. Oh yes, Sunday is still a busy day out here. And we'd look where people were pointing, and something interesting would be standing there. We exited the park through the northeast gate, which put us on US 212 and took us over the Beartooth Pass. Truly remarkable. 3 or 4 times we had climbed a ways, and I had started looking for a sign to tell me how high the pass was, only to see cars driving more switchbacks ahead. When we finally reached the top, the sign said 10,947 feet. Smoke filled the valleys below, and only made the altitude seem higher, since the bottom was out of sight. Snow came right up to the road, and even onto it once. I said yesterday that it was hard to imagine what more we'd see today. I didn't see these great sights coming. This has been a fantastic day to cap off our time with Håkan. Tomorrow he starts his journey back to LA, and we prepare to continue east. Not seeing him in my mirror the next leg is going to feel like one of those days you don't wear a watch and think you must have lost it every time you look at your wrist. We had some great adventure together, and hope we can do it again someday. Håkan started off on his way back to LA bright and early this morning. We've decided to just settle in Cody, Wyoming. There's beautiful Yellowstone next door, there's a German restaurant downtown. We could make do. Only kidding. Though we have stayed 1 extra day here to reset for the second half of the ride. We did laundry, restocked supplies, charted routes, and had a nap. We'll set out eastward again tomorrow morning. We're looking forward to finally reaching good AQI levels. Cody's only at a poor 65 instead of the off-the-charts 500 plus like some of the West Coast, but we're still tired of breathing the haze. 5 days to Marshfield. As we rolled into Casper, Wyoming today, for the first time we crossed over the path we took eastward in May. We stopped at the same Maverick for gas and tried to remember what the weather had been like. Windy, we think? It was windy today, too. A crosswind gusted across the flat stretches. We swayed or leaned as necessary and rode onward. Did we see small lumps of snow in the tall grasses? It seems unlikely in the 80-ish air, but it looked too white for mineral deposits. Hoken let us know late yesterday that he had covered over 600 miles and expected to make it home today. I'm not sure if he'll scoff at our short 220 miles today, or if his saddle end will be jealous. The mile-long trains, yes plural, pulling boxcars heaped with coal downhill to the east, reminded us that Wyoming's natural beauty is not what drives its economy. It is the nation's primary producer of our dirtiest power source. Mining is its largest economic sector. While we were watching trains, we also got to do some light off-roading. US 20 is currently a gravel road for about 14 miles east of Lusk, Wyoming. The road crews are laying new asphalt, but they have quite a stretch to cover. To lighten the day, we've begun Nebraska with something silly that we have been joking about with friends for years. Carhenge. Just north of Alliance, Nebraska stands a replica of Stonehenge, constructed of old cars in 1987. Unfortunately, we're here a few days before the autumnal equinox, so the alignment of the sun isn't perfect, but we couldn't pass up the opportunity to see it anyway. Chadron, Nebraska is our stop for this evening. Finally, we've arrived at a place I've been before, if only a handful of times. There's a Runza in the parking lot. Dinner may have been decided. We have arrived at the day that was the initial driver of this route. When I got to Boston, I couldn't believe that the US 20 that ran through my tiny hometown ended just a few blocks down the street from my new home. I learned that US 20 is the second longest road in the US, running from coast to coast. I started planning to someday travel it from one end to the other. That was supposed to happen this year. Plans changed, and we ended up with a different adventure, which has been great. But today, we checked in on the places that I was surprised to find connected. Valentine and O'Neill are each similar and different from my memory in their own ways. Very much the same layout, but different stores, different schools, and even different water towers. We found the stream that I used to bike to and fish for trout. We saw the houses that I used to live in, one still brown and cream with a heart-shaped address plaque attached, one now green with white trim and a paved street out front. We took a few minutes when we arrived in O'Neill to catch up on correspondence. Then, while we waited for our pizza order, we used the last of the day's light to travel out to Page and pay respects. I nearly missed the turn. There is no sign of the giant Kent tank that sat on the corner 2 decades ago. Unfortunately, my tires and chain are too worn for a trip down the gravel roads to the old farm. Maybe another year. We're finally back on Central Time. Believe it or not, I'm hoping the potential rain comes tonight. Somehow, despite fighting headwind all day, the smoky air has followed us. There was haze all day and an AQI over 100. Maybe the rain would knock some of it out. We've finally made the transition from finishing one state in 2 days to finishing 2 states in 1 day. We followed US 20 out of Nebraska and up to Sioux City. Storm clouds dissipated as we neared the border, and the sky turned blue for the rest of the day. We turned a bit more north, first on US 75 and then on Iowa 60. Picnic lunch behind a filling station was a good opportunity to warm up in the sun. Just before passing into Minnesota, we drove past the counterpoint to Beartooth Pass, the highest point in Iowa, Hawkeye Point, at a whopping 1,670 feet. Amanda says I missed the more important sign. They were selling fresh cider apple donuts. After another hour and a half, we arrived at our last overnight, Mankato, Minnesota. Finally, good AQI. We'll reach Marshfield tomorrow. We made it. Fall is in full swing up here. Pretty leaf color, cool air. Perfect motorcycling weather, as indicated by how many we waved at. We took a scenic route and found just a few more curves to enjoy getting in and out of the Mississippi River Basin. A closed road and a mistaken direction only made for a nice bit of extra adventure. Our final odometer reading is 63,538. That brings our total miles logged this trip to 3,224. It has been a fantastic journey. I think we're both anxious for a few days off, but also ready to update some gear and prepare for the next ride.